Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. Her fingers latched onto my elbow and yanked hard. I stumbled off the step as voices flared behind us. Glass clinked, then a shout aimed straight at my spine. "Run," she breathed, breath sharp in my ear. I moved because freezing would get me hurt. A Mark 34. Maura dragged me toward the alley cut between buildings. Behind us, his joke turned into my name like a knife. My chest fluttered, the old collapse pressing in. I kept pace anyway because tonight had teeth. We hit the corner and nearly clipped a cyclist. He hissed and kept going, tires whispering like a warning. Maura checked over her shoulder once and released me. "Left," she said, already pivoting into the narrow lane. I followed, steps loud enough to give us away. A door banged open back on the street. Tom's voice chased us with crooked humor and heat. "Come toast the hero," floated after us like bait. Maura didn't look back, shoulders squared for a blow. I tasted fear and swallowed it before it owned me. The alley opened onto a service lot with potholes. A car rolled in fast and braked late. We halted as tires squealed, the driver throwing up a hand. Maura edged ahead and pulled me across the front bumper. I went because hesitation would get me flattened. We ducked behind a dumpster and caught our breath. Somewhere above, a door latch clicked like a countdown. Maura pressed her palm to my sternum once and steadied me. "Eyes here," she said, focus burning like a rope. "I need you present, not apologizing." I straightened and felt the old shrink vanish a notch. Noise from the bar thinned, replaced by distant sirens. Her jaw worked, one muscle twitching like a tell. "What's the play?" I asked, voice almost mine. She scanned the lot, then pointed to the street exit. We stepped out and blended with a loose crowd. Tom's friends spilled onto the sidewalk like a spill. One spotted me and lifted his chin with a smirk. Maura slid closer and took my arm like a date. "Smile now," she whispered, daring me to grow. I did, a shaky thing that turned sturdier mid-breath. The friend hesitated, uncertain of the picture we made. We passed him and I felt something click back into place. A woman laughed nearby and it felt like cover. We kept walking because stopping invites storms. At the corner, the wind cut and changed the plan. A poster tore loose and slapped my face mid-step. I flinched and the flinch almost dragged me under. Maura peeled it off and crumpled it with a twist. "Shake it out," she said, watching for pursuit. My phone buzzed twice with Tom's name flashing. I almost answered out of habit and hunger. Maura angled the screen down with 2 fingers and waited. The buzzing stopped while a siren rose somewhere close. I pocketed the phone and felt my hands steady. We veered into a quiet side street with shut windows. A stray dog trotted past and glanced once at us. Maura halted near a loading dock and lifted her chin. "Give me one clean sentence about yourself," she said. My mouth dried, the old stammer pawing for room. "I build things people click on." It came out small, then firm by will. She nodded once like she could work with that. "Good, keep that sentence ready like a blade." A door inside the dock thumped twice, then went silent. Footsteps approached from the main road, 3 and unhurried. Maura raised her hand, fingers tight like a countdown. We crouched behind the dock rail and waited it out. 2 men passed, joking about tips and spilled drinks. The third paused, then moved on with a cough. She exhaled slow and checked my face for cracks. "You wanted to stay back there," she said. I looked at my shoes and felt the truth burn. "Yeah, to be laughed at where it's warm." The shame slid off a fraction as she watched. "Not tonight," she rolled her shoulders and reset. Her voice softened like sandpaper turned on its side. "You walk with me until your legs remember." I nodded and felt heat crawl to my ears. We started again, pace steady like a drum. 2 blocks later, the air shifted with rain threat. People hurried, heads down, momentum on our side now. I matched her stride and found a rhythm I owned. In the glass of a dark shop, I saw us reflected. We looked like a team, which scared me. A taxi slowed and the driver jerked his chin at us. Maura raised one finger and he pulled to the curb. I reached for the door and froze at the handle. Tom's call lit the screen again and held there. She eyed it, then me, waiting for my choice. I hit decline and the button felt like a lever. The call died and the silence felt charged. Maura opened the back door and slid in first. I followed, heart loud enough to drown the engine. "Station," she told the driver, voice clean and final. The cab lurched forward and city noise folded behind us. I stared at my knuckles and saw the tremor fade. Maura watched the road and tapped twice on her knee. "Tomorrow you pitch," she said, not asking for agreement. I sent her ahead and felt resolve lock in place. At a red light, a couple argued hard on the corner. The woman jabbed a finger, the man flinched and retreated. Maura glanced once and then back to the windshield. "Patterns repeat until someone breaks them," she said. I breathed once like a diver and decided to surface. The light changed and the driver punched the gas. I braced, then let my shoulders drop an inch. The old voice tried to crawl back up my throat. I pushed it down with that one clean sentence. Outside, the rain finally started and wiped footsteps away. She slid a chair across the floor and blocked my exit. "Stand there," her finger tapped the ground like a metronome. My throat tightened, but I stepped into the spot. "Give me your opener," voice up. I drew breath and felt it snag. "People use this because it works." The line left my mouth cleaner than last night. She watched my shoulders rise, then nudged them lower. Again, no apology in it. Heat crept up my neck like a dare. I reset and punched the words out. She paced 3 steps, then snapped her fingers once. "Better keep pressure on the pause." The room thrummed with my pulse and the clock. Silence stretched until it became a test. Her phone buzzed face down and she ignored it. "Objections hit me," she said, hands ready. "Too expensive," I fired back without blinking. "Prove value or cut scope," dropped from my mouth. She tilted her head and almost smiled. "Slow your exhale," she murmured, palm hovering near my chest. I followed the count and found steadier ground. "Now answer like you belong in the room." I met her gaze and let the words land. They didn't wobble this time. The door rattled once and froze me mid-sentence. She held up a finger and listened hard. Footsteps moved on and faded down the hall. "Carry on," she said, voice smooth and sure. I started again, daring the air to fight. My phone lit up with his name pulsing. I flipped it over, screen down, and kept going. Maura's eyebrow lifted, then dropped without comment. "Close strong," she said, circling like a coach. I delivered the ask and felt my hands steady. She dragged 2 chairs to mock a panel. 3 faces, left one is bored. She slouched into the chair and flicked her wrist. "Win them in 8 words," came like a whistle. I went lean and left no room for doubt. "Now the tough one," she said and leaned forward. She drilled me with rapid questions and sudden stops. I trimmed answers until only muscle remained. Her foot tapped a rhythm that pushed me faster. My breath found a new cadence. A knock landed sharp, then nothing followed. Her eyes cut to the door, then back to me. "Ignore it," she said, testing my focus. I pushed through a feature list in 2 lines. She nodded without giving me relief. The lock clicked from outside and held. Maura moved closer to the wall and stilled. We waited for a second attempt that never came. "That will happen tomorrow, different shape." She let that hang like a storm alert. "Time for a curve," she said and dimmed her tone. "Tell me a win without bragging." I swallowed, then picked one clean example. Short setup, hard number, quick result. Her mouth twitched like a held-back smile. "Now lose something without making excuses." The request hit where I still bruised. I named the failure and owned the mistake. Then the fix, simple and direct. Her shoulders lowered as if permission granted. She handed me a water bottle and watched me drink. "Your voice is stronger when you plant your feet." I widened my stance and felt the floor answer. That locked that in and breathed from there. She shrugged like it was basic and vital. My phone buzzed again with a new number. Unknown twice, paused, then a 3rd time. I looked to her and raised an eyebrow. She reached out and pressed my wrist down. "Not now, protect the line you're building." We took the stairs 2 at a time and hid outside. Traffic roared enough to cloak our talk. She pointed across the street at a glass doorway. "Go ask for a meeting slot." My gut tightened and then I moved. The receptionist clocked my hesitation like a hawk. I planted my feet and delivered my opener. He checked a schedule and lifted a shoulder. 3 tomorrow, 10 minutes, don't waste them." I nodded once because anything else would leak out. Back on the sidewalk, the sky threatened rain again. Maura stopped beneath an overhang and studied my face. "You almost apologized in there," came quiet and edged. I clenched my jaw and let the impulse die. "Fix that before it costs you." Her phone lit, then stayed lit too long. She flicked her eyes at it, then away. "We'll do one last drill," she announced like a verdict. We cut into a narrow courtyard behind the building. She counted down on her fingers for a final run. I crushed the pitch in one breath and held eye contact. She folded her arms and let me twist in silence. Then a single nod that felt Lee. Kia green light. Good enough to get in the door. The words fueled relief and fear together. Bootsteps scraped behind us and I turned. One of his buddies leaned on the gate with a grin. Big day tomorrow, champ, his tone dripped old poison. Mara stepped between us and didn't blink. Walk, she said to me without looking back. I pivoted and moved as the gate creaked open. The guy muttered something designed to hook me. I didn't bite because this was the real test. We hit the corner and merged with steady foot traffic. My pulse settled into a pace I could own. At the crosswalk, she stood close and lowered her voice. After your slot, there is something I'll ask. The way she framed it sent current up my spine. Nothing illegal, she added with a tight half smile. Still, it carries weight. Why me? I asked and kept my tone even. Because you follow through when it's rough. She looked past me as if measuring the street. And because he stops under pressure, not you. The last line landed like a marker for later. We reached a bus shelter as drops began. She pulled her hood up and scanned the road. Your job tonight is rest and silence. I almost joked and let it die mid-throat. Text me proof you turned the phone off. The bus arrived with brakes squealing like a warning. She stepped aboard and held my gaze through the door. Tomorrow morning, meet me outside the lobby. I tapped the roof twice like a vow. She nodded once and the bus carried her away. Rain hardened and soaked through my shirt fast. I stood there until the street cleared. The urge to check messages clawed at my pocket. I powered down and felt the world go quiet. The quiet felt dangerous and exactly right. The revolving door jammed and clipped my shoulder on entry. I shoved through and hit the marble with a stumble. Mara waited by the elevators with a neutral face. Straight up, no warm-up, you're ready. My throat dried and I nodded anyway. We stepped into the lift and the doors kissed shut. Her reflection studied me like I was a suspect. Plant your heels on the ask, she whispered. I rolled my neck once and counted 4 beats. The bell chimed and the floor arrived like a test. A receptionist scanned our names and waved us forward. The hallway stretched, quiet and predatory. Mara fell half a step behind me on purpose. Lead from the first hello came low and steady. I pushed the conference door and crossed the threshold. 3 executives waited with notebooks open like traps. I shook hands without squeezing to prove anything. Start when you're ready, one leaned back and watched. I drew a breath and let my opener strike. No tremor, no apology, only intent. The left executive checked the clock mid-sentence and smirked. I pivoted and sliced the spiel to the bone. I showed proof in one crisp slide and stopped talking. The room went silent for 1 beat too long. Then quick questions hit like jabs. Why now? The middle one tapped a pen twice. Because your pipeline stalls after step 2. He froze that pen midair and frowned. Evidence, the word came clipped and expectant. I answered with a number and a single date. Upside, the right one leaned forward like a buyer. Higher conversion with fewer steps. How much? He didn't blink while waiting. I gave the range and held eye contact. His jaw eased a fraction and I felt air return. The heavy door pushed inward before I finished. A courier poked in with a padded envelope. Delivery for management. He scanned the room and lingered. Mara shifted near the wall and cut him off. He'll take it out there, she told him, chin raised. The interruption broke focus like a snapped wire. I paused 1 heartbeat and recentered on the table. We're back, I said and folded the last point clean. The executives glanced at one another and wrote notes. Step outside for 5 minutes, the left one murmured. In the corridor, Mara's expression had sharp corners. Plant stayed too long, her eyes tracked the courier leaving. You think he's ours? I asked, voice level. He's someone else, her hand hovered near my elbow. Ignore it, finish like it's the only room. We were called in before my pulse settled. They sat closer to the table than before. Make the close, the middle one instructed quietly. I laid out terms in 2 sentences and waited. A nod, then another, the third stayed stone still. You have 10 minutes next week to show traction. The line dropped like a measured weight. Booked Tuesday, I replied without looking at Mara. We'll confirm by noon, the right one stood first. His handshake had intent and a warning baked in. We exited to the hallway and I exhaled once. Mara let her shoulders fall a notch, then reset. Not pretty, still effective, her mouth flickered, almost amused. You kept control when the air shifted. I tucked that away because doubting it would waste it. We took the stairs instead of the lift by instinct. Halfway down, footsteps hammered up toward us. Tom's friend from yesterday rounded the landing with a grin. Missed you at the party, slugger, he blocked the rail. Maura stepped to my side and tilted her head. You lost me, I said and tried to slide past. He mirrored the move and held up a keycard. I'll escort you out, the sarcasm laced every syllable. Maura extended a hand for the card without blinking. He hesitated and tucked it away like a prize. Move, I told him, voice even and flat. He laughed and reached for my shoulder like a dare. I brushed his wrist aside and kept descending. Maura stayed between us until we hit the atrium. He peeled off with a mutter that promised rounds 2 and 3. Outside, traffic noise swallowed the leftover adrenaline. Maura angled us toward a coffee stand and paused before ordering. Now for my ask, she said and held my gaze. It involves something you keep safe for a while. My breath shortened because I knew it'd wait. Is he going to show up at my door? Not if I manage this cleanly, her jaw tightened. I need a buffer, no one suspects. I didn't respond right away because choice needed space. Tell me where and when, I answered finally. Tonight, backlot behind the gym. Short handoff, no debate, her tone left no exits. I checked the time and felt the days shrink around us. Wear something forgettable, she added with a glance. I understood more than she said and less than I wanted. My phone, still off, burned like a hot stone in pocket memory. I left it alone because discipline mattered more now. Maura studied my face to see if I'd flinch. I didn't, though my ribs felt tight like banded. Good, she murmured and scanned the street for tails. We walked 2 blocks without talking and then split. 3 hours, she said across the crosswalk like a code. I raised 2 fingers in answer and kept moving. A bus sighed to stop and blocked my view. When it pulled away, she was gone. I headed home by side streets to stay uninteresting. The urge to brag about the meeting snapped at me. I fed it nothing and kept my pace steady. The afternoon stretched thin and untrustworthy. I waited it out with the phone dark and stubborn. Dusk came earlier than I wanted and brought nerves. I reached the gym lot 5 minutes before the hour. A cleaning crew rolled out carts and ignored everything. I stood near the loading dock and counted slow. Tires crackled over gravel and lights flashed twice. Maura parked with the engine running and opened the trunk. She didn't wave me over or smile for cover. Take only the envelope, her voice was almost a breath. Do not read it unless I text a single word. I approached and saw a sealed packet taped inside. Code word is now, she added without looking up. Different puncture means different outcome, her eyes tracked the gate. Meaning, I asked and kept my hands still. If I go quiet for 2 days, assume the worst. The yard seemed to tilt as she said it. I peeled the packet free and slid it under my jacket. It had weight that wasn't just paper. Where do I stash it? I asked carefully. Not home, not work, somewhere you trust alone. I nodded because anything else would spook both of us. A motorcycle roared past the fence and then cut out. We froze and listened for boots or laughter. Nothing followed, only the tick of her engine cooling. Go, she whispered, urgency threading through the calm. Wait 10 minutes before you leave the block. I stepped back and closed the trunk with my forearm. She backed out slow, head turned like a sentry. The car disappeared around the corner without drama. I stood there with my heartbeat loud and counted. 9 minutes stretched forever, then ended on a breath. On minute 10, I moved to the street and blended in. 2 teenagers argued near the bus stop and didn't notice me. A patrol car rolled by and barely slowed. I kept my hands out of my pockets and walked. Every step felt like it could change the night. At my corner, a message finally vibrated on my wristband. It showed one word exactly as promised. Now. I locked my jaw and headed toward the hiding place. Some lines once crossed don't allow return. I cut across the park and didn't look back. Shoes slapping, breath caged, wristband buzzing once more. The word still burned on the display like a dare. Now. I aimed for the station lockers and kept my head down. A guard chatted near the turnstiles and blocked my route. I veered to the newsstand and pretended to read. When he turned, I slid past and took the stairs. Hands steady, steps counted, mouth dry. I reached the row and stopped at my unit. 2 tourists argued 3 meters away and bought me cover. I spun the dial and felt the click land. The door sprang loose and showed the packet waiting. It sat where I left it earlier that night, heavier now that the order had arrived. I tucked it under my jacket and closed up. A man with a courier bag lingered, pretending to tie laces. He watched my reflection in the glass behind me. I didn't turn, I adjusted my collar and walked. Footsteps lifted and matched pace a few beats later. On the escalator, he shifted to my blind side. I let one person pass and dropped 2 steps. He hesitated, then took out his phone and typed. I saw my initials on his screen in block letters. Ice crawled across my back and sharpened my focus. At the exit, I cut left and used a crowd. He lost sight for 3 seconds, which was enough. I slipped through a service door and took the stairs. 2 flights down, the air changed and echoed differently. Another door, a short corridor, an unmarked exit. I came out in an alley where nothing moved. No smell, no noise, only my pulse like a drum. The courier didn't appear for a full minute. He finally strode past the opening and scanned both ways. I stayed still and counted 10 more beats. I opened the packet with my thumbnail and stopped. This was the point of no return by choice. I studied my breathing and ripped the seal clean. Inside sat documents thick with numbers and names. 3 photos, 2 receipts, 1 short letter. I read the letter twice and felt my stomach lurch. Dates, transfers, a hint toward a dummy account. The photos showed signatures that matched across forms. The receipts carried a merchant code I recognized. Everything pointed toward a scheduled withdrawal tomorrow morning. If that withdrawal landed, she would be trapped. The letter detailed timing that narrowed to 1 window. I checked the street and folded everything tight. Next step required a terminal with a hard connection. No wireless, no logging into anything traceable. I knew one place that still ran old systems. A community center computer lab that shut at midnight. Hard lines, cash entry, cameras blocked by tape stickers. I pushed into traffic and took a bus 2 stops. Every passenger looked like trouble until they didn't. At the center, the night attendant watched sports and ignored me. I paid for an hour and signed a fake name. He slid a key across and Neve. R glanced up. I took a back machine and wiped the keyboard once. Hands stopped shaking when the screen lit up. I fed the merchant code into a search field. Buried references crawled up like stubborn weeds. A shell company with a recent address change. The address sat 4 blocks from Tom's office. I clicked into public filings and found a missing page. I printed the page and pocketed it with the rest. Then I built a clean account with random credentials. No recovery, no phone number, no breadcrumb trail. I drafted a message to the bank fraud team. Short sentences, 1 attachment, no narrative at all. I paused before sending and pictured Mara's face. If I jumped now, Tom would panic early. If I waited, the withdrawal might clear by morning. My decision had to fit both risks at once. I chose a middle path and saved the draft. I logged out and wiped the station with a sleeve. The door coughed open near the front desk. 2 men came in and scanned the room slowly. They were not here to study or jog miles. They split in a V that pointed at me. I stood, gathered my things, and stretched like I finished. The attendant raised his chin to the newcomers. They flashed a smile that didn't reach their eyes. I returned the key and walked to the hallway. Footsteps behind me flattened the carpet with intent. At the corner, I turned the opposite direction. Not toward the main doors, toward maintenance. I swiped a random badge I found weeks ago. The reader blinked and honored the lie reluctantly. The door clicked and I slid through sideways. Behind the building, a narrow service road waited. A delivery truck idled and masked small sounds. I cut behind it and came out on Maple. The men spilled outside 1 minute later and looked confused. They split again and jogged in opposite directions. I ducked into a late-night copy shop and grabbed a booth. A self-serve scanner blinked ready and hungry. I digitized the entire packet into a cloudless drive. Then I mailed the files to a dead drop folder. 2 copies, 2 destinations, no subject lines. My wristband vibrated with a single word again. Wait. I froze and watched for a second buzz that never came. So she was mid-move and needed me quiet. I paid in cash and stepped back into the dark. The courier stood across the street and pretended to smoke. A van idled behind him with back doors cracked. I moved down the block and checked every window. He followed slow and kept me centered like a scope. I turned right and sprinted hard for the first time. He yelled once and footsteps erupted from the van. Two shapes pounded behind me and gained a stride. I cut through a parking lot and hurdled a chain. One clipped a foot and crashed into the asphalt. The other kept after me and didn't get tired. The campus fence loomed and offered only one choice. I climbed and felt a hand rush my ankle. I kicked free and dropped on the far side. Knees barked, packet held, momentum saved. I rolled, got up, and kept moving. The science building door was propped with a rock. I slipped inside and posted up by the stairwell. The follower hit the door and glanced around fast. I threw the rock down the hallway to make noise. He chased the sound and gave me room. On the third floor was a lab with ancient gear. I knew the TA who never locked after hours. Inside, a fax machine still lived for grant paperwork. I fed the letter and photos to two numbers. One belonged to the bank, one to a regulator. The lines chattered forever and finally spat confirmation. I pocketed the slips and erased the outgoing log. The lab clock chimed the half hour and jolted me. I pushed back into the stairwell and listened hard. Silence, then a radio crackled 2 floors below. I exited through the roof hatch and squinted at the city. Wind stung enough to make my choice urgent. I crossed to the next building on a maintenance bridge. Halfway across, my shoe slipped and heart spiked. I grabbed the rail and kept going because falling ends everything. On the far roof, my wristband buzzed again. Send. I crouched behind a vent and reopened the draft. 2 lines, 3 attachments, no greetings. I hit transmit and watched the progress bar crawl. The message left my screen and vanished into the pipe. I waited for a reply that did not come. Instead, my inbox bloomed with an automated ticket number. Not perfect, still movement. I copied it to a sticky note in my head. A text arrived from an unknown number right after. Wrong place. My ribs went tight as wire. I typed back 3 words I never imagined writing. Switching routes now. Another text came, shorter and colder than before. Hurry. I pocketed the device and started down the fire stairs. Every door to the street had a peephole and a chain. I chose one that opened onto a side yard. A dog barked where I expected silence and struck hard. I froze, then extended my free hand low and still. The bark clipped into a warning growl. And held. I backed away and chose the other door without noise. Some decisions owe thanks to teeth you didn't meet. On the sidewalk, traffic had thinned to almost nothing. I flagged a rideshare and watched the plate number. At the last second, I waved the driver away. No trail, no license tied to me tonight. I walked toward the river where cameras go blind. Under the bridge, a pair of teenagers traded insults. They ignored me because I did not look like money. I tucked the packet deeper and kept to the fence. My shadow stretched long and turned jittery with each lamp. I kept moving until the noise above drowned everything. My wrist pulsed once more with a final command. Drop. I reached the storage unit I rented under a fake lockbox, second shelf, no names anywhere. The envelope slipped inside and vanished into a blackout bin. I sealed the latch and pressed my forehead to metal. Heat from panic still swarmed behind my eyes. Then a low hum crawled up from the concrete and stopped me. A car idled on the far side of the fence. Doors opened, 2, maybe 3, time to vanish. I killed the light and eased through the side exit. Gravel shifted under my shoes and warned me to slow. I followed the fence line to the maintenance gate. It had a faulty chain you could lift if patient. I lifted it and crawled through face first. On the other side, I landed in weeds and mud. My jeans soaked and chilled me enough to sharpen thinking. The idling car crept along the fence like a shark. A flashlight beam swept the units in a lazy arc. I lay still and counted to 40 with shallow breaths. When the beam passed, I crawled toward the embankment. Loose stone slid and tried to snitch on me. I hugged the ground and waited for the engine to fade. It finally did, but not all the way. The driver killed the lights and simply waited. They were patient, I had to be more. I pulled my sleeve over the wristband and muted alerts. No beeps, no vibrations, no accidental Morse. I measured 5 minutes with my heartbeat and memory. Then another 5 with slow teeth on lip pressure. A train thundered overhead and gifted me cover. I popped up, crossed the service road, and cut downhill. Behind me, doors slammed and men shouted frustrated fragments. I broke into a jog and did not look back. The river path spat me out near the old brewery. Mara waited under the awning with a hood up. She scanned me once and held out her palm. I placed the ticket number in her hand on a napkin. Her eyes flicked and brightened by a single notch. You chose speed over noise, she murmured and pocketed it. Any tales? I asked and watched the street. One for me, two for you, she glanced past me. They missed the switch but not the smell. I heard impatience in her breathing, tight and clipped. We're almost clear if nothing stupid happens. What qualifies as stupid tonight? My voice barely rose. Telling the story before the ink dries. She took a step back and studied the corners. I need one more help from you now. Her tone hardened into something that tolerated no debate. Name it. I wiped mud from my hands and waited. Walk away and do not call me until Tuesday. Even if I vanish, even if he knocks twice. Every word hit like a hammer on fresh glass. I nodded because the other option invited funerals. She squeezed my forearm once and released. All debts will square if this lands. The promise felt dangerous and heavy and necessary. She turned and melted into the street without drama. I watched the awning sway and felt the night hold its breath. My door rattled twice before dawn and held tight. Silence followed like a crouched figure behind frosted glass. Knuckle tapped 3 times in a rhythm I knew. I watched the peephole without breathing for 5 counts. Then the rhythm repeated and got mean. Open up, the voice cut clean through the wood. I rested my forearm on the chain and waited. Neighbor complained about noise, came softer like bait. I slid my keys into my pocket and stayed still. No noise here, I answered through the gap. A pause, then a scrape along the jamb like a test. I left something last night, drifted through in a friendly tone. Not friendly enough to fool me twice this week. Footsteps receded down the hall and stopped near stairs. They returned with more weight and less patience. I backed toward the kitchen and reached for nothing. Phone stayed black on purpose because rules mattered. I killed the overhead lamp to erase my silhouette. The lock thumped once, then again with tool pressure. A hinge squealed and the chain trembled like a wire. Time to leave through the other way fast. I slid onto the fire escape and climbed. Metal complained but held as boots hid inside. I took 2 landings and quick jumps and gritted teeth. Below me a window snapped open with a shout. I dropped to the alley and rolled once. Palms stung, knees yelled, no stopping now. I cut, crossed trash day chaos and reached the street. A car idled with lights off and doors unlatched. I turned away and blended with a jogger group. Half a block later a sedan eased beside me. Window down, Tom leaned across the console and smirked. You disappeared when we were toasting, he tracked my pace. You ignoring friends now, he added with a lazy grin. I kept running and didn't give him a window. He shadowed me to the corner and matched cadence. Hop in and we talk like grown-ups, he urged. I stopped at the crossing and faced the light. Busy morning, my voice stayed calm and square. Then tonight we settle up, he answered without blinking. The light shifted, I sprinted straight through traffic. Tom honked twice and peeled away down Maple. I cut left toward the parking space with scanners. If he had my address, he had my favorite haunts. I needed a newer pattern before noon. 2 hours later, the ticket number returned with updates. Fraud unit flagged the account and froze pending withdrawals. The message only showed a redacted case line. Attached sat a meeting invite for 11 sharp. Location listed a downtown branch with a glass atrium. I arrived 10 minutes early and stayed outside. Street buzzed enough to hide a conversation if needed. Mara was nowhere, which fit the rules perfectly. A woman in a blazer appeared and scanned faces. She located me without hesitation and tapped her folder. Walk with me, she said as we crossed traffic. We keep this off cameras until decisions settle. Her voice carried authority and a tired edge. Inside a side conference room, she locked the door. She opened the folder and slid a single page. Your submission triggered an internal watch list. She placed a pen on the table and watched. We want a witness if this escalates by noon. I scanned the page and recognized one signature. It matched the receipts from last night exactly. Who's behind the curtain? I asked and stayed seated. We think someone used her authorization and rerouted funds. She didn't use names, which meant she suspected my knowledge. We're inviting all parties to a controlled meeting. Here at 10:45, stay until we call. I stared at the clock and weighed my next move. Walking out was safe and useless and cowardly. Staying kept me close to the blast zone. I chose the blast because distance never saved me. She nodded once like she understood that calculus. At 10:44 the door opened and the room shifted. Tom walked in with a lawyer and a shrug. He scanned me like I carried a microphone. You dragged me here for what? He complained to no one. Blazer woman set a recorder on the table. She started with the bland questions designed to trap. Names, departments, approval chains, recent changes. Tom answered easy and long and charming. He leaned back when he lied and touched his cuff. I clocked it and tucked the tell for later. Then she placed a sign form on the table. The ink line matched the photo I sent overnight. Is that your signature? She asked with a quiet stare. Tom kept his smile and looked at the ceiling. My wife handles household accounts, he replied in a drawl. Not a household account, she corrected without blinking. Corporate card linked to vendor pass-through. The lawyer frowned and whispered behind his palm. Tom reached for the paper and found her hand blocking. He withdrew and tried a different smile. A knock at the door ended his rhythm fast. Mara entered with a small notebook and steady steps. She ignored me like a professional who knew better. Her eyes met Blazer woman's and held for a beat. Here is a named party, she announced and sat. Tom's mouth twitched as if he tasted old metal. You dragged her into the circus, he sneered at nobody. Mara folded her hands and waited him out. Blazer woman clicked the recorder and spoke the time. Let's move to the transaction scheduled for 11. Documents change hands in quick passes. Numbers align like a zipper closing under pressure. Tom cracked a knuckle and checked his phone. Business continuity, he muttered while avoiding the page. The lawyer slid him a note that he ignored. Explain the vendor route, Blazer woman instructed and leaned forward. Tom launched into a tidy story about incentives. He used phrases I had never heard in our circle. It sounded rehearsed with the wrong pauses and beats. I watched Mara watch him and felt the room tilt. Her pen tapped once and then stilled like a metronome. May I ask one clarification? She interrupted with precision. Blazer woman gestured open and waited for the shot. Which board member approved the pass-through revision? Mara asked. Tom blinked twice and flexed his jaw. Internal policy allows director sign-off during quarter close. He delivered it too fast for a fresh thought. Mara slid a printed email across the table. It carried a timestamp after the revision already executed. Still, incest stacked in layers while he recalculated. Administrative lag, he countered with a shrug and cough. Blazer woman placed a second page beside the first. This one showed an internal message about red flags. The warning came from a separate department last week. My ticket number appeared in the corner like a brand. Tom went very still without letting his shoulders drop. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and finally spoke. We object to the use of unverified attachments today. Blazer woman turned to the window and kept her voice mild. Verification happened at 9 from 2 independent systems. I held my breath because the next moment mattered. Tom stood abruptly and paced to the credenza. He poured water and didn't drink any of it. Mara watched the glass stay full and looked bored. I recognized a man stalling while counting exits. He circled back to the chair and leaned forward. Let's cut through this, he tried with a warm tone. The team missed reconciliation during quarter-end crunch. He smiled like partnership and floated the phrase again. The team missed it, he repeated as if casting a spell. Mara uncapped her pen and drew a neat X. Not a team, she answered without raising volume. One person rerouted 3 payments into a shell. Blazer woman flipped to a page that named the shell. Tom's hand hovered over the table and didn't land. His phone buzzed face down and he flinched visibly. The lawyer paled by a shade and packed his folder. We will adjourn for counsel, he announced while standing. Stay seated, Blazer woman replied and lifted a badge. 2 security officers stepped in and closed the doorway. Tom tried to smile and landed somewhere near panic. This is a misunderstanding, he offered to the air. Fine, clarify it at headquarters, Blazer woman countered coolly. He glanced at me like I started the fire. I kept my face blank because gloating invites knives. Security escorted him out with measured firmness. The lawyer followed while barking into his phone. The door closed and the room felt suddenly smaller. Mara stared at the table and squeezed her notebook hard. I exhaled for the first time in 20 minutes. Blazer woman turned off the recorder and relaxed 2 degrees. Your documentation filled critical gaps we couldn't reach. Her eyes flicked to my sleeve where mud had dried. You okay to give a statement this afternoon? I nodded because refusing would undo everything important. Good, prepare for noise later, it will come fast. She left us with a card I didn't touch. Maura gathered her notebook and stood without looking at me. You kept the promise, she said with a small nod. I gripped the chair back and felt adrenaline finally hit. In the hallway, she stopped and leaned against the wall. Her breathing evened out while footsteps thudded past. You're clear to disappear until Tuesday night, she said. You do not answer unfamiliar numbers until then. I agreed because rules had saved us 3 times today. We took an elevator that halted at the garage. The doors opened to a long row of parked cars. A figure stepped out from behind a pillar and waved. Tom's friend from the stairwell grinned like it was casual. Maura's shoulders squared and her chin lifted a fraction. Busy morning, he drawled as he approached with hands up. Management asked me to drive you both home. Maura flashed a dry smile and shook her head once. We ordered a cab, she replied and stepped aside. He matched her step and kept closing the gap. I moved between them and held a palm out. Not today, I told him with no extra words. He chuckled and pocketed his hands like a trick lost. You boys never learn, he muttered while scanning exits. Then he lunged sideways and hit the call button. The elevator doors slid shut on that move. We were stuck with him and a blank control panel. He leaned back and looked pleased with himself. Wrong floor, he said while watching our reflections. Top level has the best view. The car rose and my heartbeat climbed with it. Maura shifted her stance and eased her weight forward. I rolled my shoulders and planted my heels hard. The doors opened onto the roof and hot wind hit. He walked out first and lit a smile that wasn't friendly. Let's talk without microphones, he chirped as he paced. Maura stood still and gave him nothing to work with. I angled left and took away his easy exit. He watched me measure him and finally dropped the act. What did you send last night? Enough to stop the morning bleed, I answered evenly. He grimaced and cracked his neck like a ritual. You just put her in a corner, he hissed. Maura stepped forward and shoved him back with one hand. She's not the one cornered anymore. He recovered fast and went underhand with the next move. You playing hero because she gave you private lessons. The bait hit its mark and burned under my ribs. I swallowed it whole and did not give him a scene. He smirked and realized I wasn't going to swing. Fine new plan, he said and pulled out his phone. He lifted it like he had leverage on us. A new voice spoke from the stairs behind him. Put it down and keep your hands visible. 2 uniformed officers walked onto the roof with purpose. The friend froze and raised both hands slow. Maura stepped back and kept me behind her shoulder. One officer collected the phone and checked the screen. He nodded and pocketed it while the friend cursed softly. Call came from inside, the officer explained while cuffing. What call? I asked with my mouth suddenly dry. The bank flagged a follow car in the footage, he said. Looks like you had someone tracking your movements. He looked at me as if confirming a rumor. I nodded once because yes, that part was true. They led the friend toward the stairwell and paused. Detectives will want a statement from both of you. Maura flashed the order to disappear with a glance. We will cooperate at headquarters after council, she answered. The officer gave a look that said he understood games. We descended 1 level and slipped out a side door. Street noise slapped me like a wake-up I needed. Maura flagged a cab and climbed in without speaking. I followed and stared at my hands for a beat. She gave the driver an address I didn't recognize. 2 turns later, she tapped my knee once and breathed. Thank you for not punching him, she murmured. It would have cost us the afternoon and more. I laughed without humor and wiped sweat from my brow. He wanted the headline, not the bruise. We stopped near a block of storefronts with shutters down. She paid and stepped out while scanning the rooftops. Walk east 3 blocks and turn into the alley. She kept moving and didn't wait for my answer. I trailed her with enough distance to look accidental. In the alley, she ducked into a delivery bay. A woman in scrubs passed her a small bundle. No words, only a nod and a quick exit. Maura joined me with the bundle tucked under her jacket. Insurance, she whispered, and checked over her shoulder. Do you need me to hold it? No, this one stays with me until signatures dry. We moved toward the avenue and shared the curb. She faced the traffic while I watched our rear. The bundle shifted once like it carried truth. Listen carefully, she said and met my eyes. Tonight you sleep somewhere new. Tomorrow you attend your 10-minute slot and crush it. Then you walk into headquarters and give a clean statement. Her words struck like a cadence I could march to. And after that, I asked because fear needs fences. After that, I finished the part you started. She touched my shoulder and held it 1 second. You did not save me, you gave me a lever. Her voice softened and then sharpened again. A horn blared and snapped us out of it. We split opposite directions like we practiced in silence. I counted intersections and kept to windowless walls. The day stretched long enough to eat weaker plans. Mine held because I refused to feed it doubt. Afternoon brought texts from unfamiliar numbers I ignored. One read we should talk like adults with 2 emojis. Another offered a settlement at a place I recognized. I muted the thread and deleted the preview logs. Temptation scratched the door and I let it scratch. Evening fell and my pitch deck tightened like a fist. I rehearsed in a borrowed office above a laundromat. 3 times through and I cut 5 more words. I stood on the line where fear becomes speed. That line carried me through every rep. Near midnight, a final message arrived from the ticket queue. Freeze extended, funds reversal in progress pending countersign. A link requested confirmation of my original submission. I read it twice and checked the header path. Everything matched the chain from the morning meeting. I clicked confirm and watched the spinner rotate slowly. Then a green check appeared and the page refreshed. No fanfare, no confetti, only a logged event number. I copied it to my notebook next to the first. 2 numbers now guarded a future I wanted intact. My chest loosened for the first time all day. I stretched my hands until the tendons stopped buzzing. A floorboard creaked outside and pulled me back tight. I braced for a knock that never landed. Sometimes the worst threat is patience stalking you. I slept in snatches with shoes on and bag packed. Dreams kept melting into door hinges and elevator dings. When the sky lightened, I stood and rolled my shoulders. The 10-minute slot waited like a lit fuse. I walked out before it ran down to nothing. The conference room door swung inward and hit my shoe. I stepped in and set my notebook on the table. Clock starts, the lead investor tapped her watch. I kept eye contact and launched the opener like a trigger. The room leaned in and I rode the silence hard. I moved through the proof points with clipped rhythm. Numbers, outcome, next step. No fluff. The partner on the right tried to distract with a cough. I held the line until he dropped his pen. Show traction, the associate nudged a laptop toward me. I connected and loaded a dashboard built at 2 a.m. 12 fresh signups from the pilot I hacked together. 3 paid conversions with receipts on screen. The graph climbed just enough to make them sit forward. Where do you falter? The lead asked and folded arms. Second step, friction slows completion, I answered without blinking. My fix reduces taps and cuts bounce. Her eyebrow rose a notch, then settled level. Ask, she said, granting exactly 1 chance. Trial for 4 weeks with a clear exit. I let it hang while the air tightened. The senior partner glanced at the associate and nodded once. Conditional yes, she replied and slid a card across. Deliver the first milestone by Friday at noon. I took the card and logged the terms aloud. 4 weeks, milestone 1 by Friday noon. The phrasing made it real and dangerous. She smiled like we both understood the wager. Have your counsel review the draft by tonight. They stood and the 10 minutes ended on schedule. I left with legs steady and breath slow. Outside, traffic noise washed off the adrenaline. A message buzzed my wrist with a new event invite. Headquarters meeting confirmed for early afternoon. I grabbed a cab and watched the mirrors. No tail, no van, no lingering friend from the roof. Still, I changed route twice before exiting near HQ. Inside, security scanned me with bored patience. A badge printed and pointed me toward a small room. A detective in plain clothes waited with a recorder. He poured water and kept his notes closed. Start from the courier at the office hallway, he said. I ran through last night and trimmed beats. No opinions, only actions and timestamps. He pressed on the packet path in the dead drop. I supplied locations and the rented unit number. He didn't react when I named the lab and faxes. He underlined the bank ticket numbers twice. Those line up, he murmured while glancing at the door. Another investigator entered and leaned against the credenza. Your friend resisted in the garage after release, he stated. Then he called someone from a prepaid and vanished. I pictured the roof wind and kept my jaw set. Do you expect retaliation today? He asked, eyes narrow. I expect attempted contact and bait, I answered cleanly. Anything physical gets logged and forwarded immediately. He wrote one word and capped his pen. Good, keep that discipline through tonight, he replied. He slid a consent form across the table. I signed and rechecked the meeting time on my badge. Stay nearby, the detective added as he stood. Counsel wants to sync with the bank on next steps. He paused, then tilted his head toward the hallway. Your documentation embarrassed 2 departments this morning. In the corridor, I almost collided with Mara. She moved fast and kept her grip on a folder tight. We fell into step to the vending alcove alone. Did you get the conditional? She asked with a quick glance. I lifted the card and tapped it once. Good, that buys us air, she breathed through her nose. She checked the ceiling camera and lowered her voice. Reversal needs a final sign-off by 1:15. If they stall, I trigger a backup you cannot unsee. The last line cut through any leftover doubt. Footsteps approached and she angled her body away. Laser Woman emerged from a side room with purpose. We're moving to the main conference, she told us. Legal wants both of you present for clarity. Her tone made it sound like a cliff edge. We entered to find a long table half filled already. Compliance, Counsel, Finance. No Tom. 2 seats waited at the far end near the screen. A clock above the door ticked toward 1:15. Thank you for coming, Counsel started without prelude. Funds in question sit in a frozen intermediary. Release requires 2 signatures tied to authorization. She looked at Mara first and then at me. Your evidence narrows the path we can lawfully take. A tech rolled a cart to the head of the table. The screen flashed a routing audit I had not seen. 3 hops, 2 reversals, 1 net destination. The final line pointed to the shell we flagged. The timestamp pinned it to this morning at 6. Attempted withdrawal failed, the tech reported succinctly. The system flagged mismatched multi-factor credentials. He glanced at me for half a second. Unfamiliar login patterns triggered the hold. Laser Woman nodded like a chess piece moved as planned. Next, we need her consent for reversal, Counsel continued. Mara slid the folder across and opened it carefully. Inside waited the bundle she collected behind the shutters. She placed a notarized statement beside it. Executed 10 minutes ago, she said with steady cadence. Valid, the notary from the corner confirmed without fuss. Counsel compared signatures with a transparent ruler. Matches all previous authorizations, she announced to the room. We will proceed pending final internal confirmation. Some shoulders dropped while others stiffened. A door opened and Tom walked in with 2 new suits. Security flanked them but didn't touch. Tom's smile looked expensive and fragile. Glad we can resolve this like professionals, he began. He spotted me and the smile cracked by degrees. Counsel gestured for him to sit at the opposite end. We're concluding a reversal proceeding, she informed calmly. Any objection must be grounded in policy or evidence. He shuffled papers and let his lawyers whisper. Then he raised a palm with performative patience. Policy requires dual consent from account owners, he said. Her consent alone is insufficient under the latest addendum. He flicked a document onto the table dramatically. A fresh addendum date blinked from the corner. The ink was too new to be comfortable. Laser Woman picked it up and passed it to compliance. They scanned the footer and frowned in unison. Filed this morning at 9:13, compliance announced. Not applicable to transactions initiated earlier. Tom's jaw locked and then unclenched with a click. He pivoted to character attacks like a man drowning. Grievance, bias, marital dispute. He threw nouns at the wall and watched none stick. Mara didn't look at him, not even once. She focused on the document stack with absolute calm. Enough, Counsel cut and turned to the clock. We proceed under the prior framework. She tapped a key and the reversal protocol appeared. 2 signature boxes glowed on the screen. One read owner, the other read supervisory review. Mara stepped forward and signed with deliberate pressure. Her hand did not shake even slightly. She stepped back and looked to the far end. Supervisory review belongs to you, Counsel nodded at Laser Woman. The pen hovered for a heartbeat that felt long. The door burst inward before the pen touched Pap. Sorry. Tom's friend stumbled in with wrists zip-tied. 2 officers followed with faces like granite. Evidence recovered from a storage location, one announced. He set a bag on the table with a thud. Everyone froze except the tech who started recording. The officer opened the bag and revealed a binder. Inside, tabs marked months with neat handwriting. He flipped to the latest divider and pointed. Ledger entries matching the shell's routing history. Tom lurched to his feet and knocked a chair. The officers moved and boxed him in. His lawyers blurted a protest that died fast. Counsel lifted the binder and scanned 2 pages. Matches the audit exactly, she stated like a verdict. Laser Woman signed the supervisory box and hit enter. The protocol chirped and spit out a confirmation code. Reversal initiated, the tech announced, voice tight. The intermediary has acknowledged the command. A status bar crawled while everyone watched its slow march. Tom sagged like a cut rope and stared at the floor. The officers guided him toward the door without force. He glanced at me with something like disbelief. The look didn't carry hate, it carried emptiness. That emptiness almost pulled me in, then I stepped back. The status bar completed and flashed completed in bold. Mara gripped the table edge and exhaled through a smile. The room released a breath it didn't know it held. Counsel printed a confirmation and slid it my way. Your submission is preserved within the case file. I nodded and tucked the printout into my folder. Mara touched my shoulder once, then let go quickly. No words there, Plenty said anyway. Laser Woman gathered her things and faced us both. Media will circle by late afternoon, she warned like weather. We left through a staff exit and found a quiet hallway. Mara leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. One more step, she whispered with a steadier breath. Statement, then disappear until tomorrow morning. I agreed because anything else risks unraveling. Downstairs, a clerk recorded our formal accounts. I kept each sentence short and verifiable. Mara finished hers and slid the pen back. We signed timestamp pages and received copies. The clerk stamped them and waved us out. Outside, my phone remained dark in my pocket. Still off, still a shield more than a tool. Mara glanced at the sky like it could betray us. Walk with me 2 blocks, then split, she said. We moved with casual steps and watchful eyes. At the corner, she stopped and faced me square. You did the hard part and didn't boast, she said. That's rarer than people think. She dug in her bag and produced a folded note. Open this only if I miss tomorrow's check-in. I slid it into my jacket without looking. Will you be safe tonight? I asked, voice low. As safe as honesty allows, she replied with a tired grin. Then her expression sharpened like a pulled blade. Keep your pilot on pace, do not drift. We joined the crowd and let it swallow our outlines. At the next corner, we peeled in opposite directions. I entered a parking space and booked a tiny room. The deck came back on screen and demanded cuts. I sliced 3 more lines and felt the pitch harden. A call request pinged from the partner's assistant. 5 minutes at 5 to confirm scope. I accepted and rehearsed answers to scoping questions. Budget bands, timeline, team structure for Sprint 1. Every response had an outcome attached like a tag. At 5, the call connected with a static pop. Milestone is stable, draft arriving in an hour. I kept my answers crisp and unambiguous. She cleared her throat like a stamp of approval. Friday noon stands, don't miss by a minute. I ended the call and let the room go quiet. The urge to text Mara a quick win flared hot. I killed it and returned to the checklist. Test accounts monitor backup demo. The to-do list trimmed down to sharp edges. Near dusk, the detective texted a single word. Clear. I slid the phone into airplane mode again. My shoulders eased a little, but not enough. I packed and headed for a different bed for the night. On the street, a familiar sedan crept beside me. Window rolled down and the driver lifted 2 fingers. Truce, he called with an uneven laugh. I didn't stop and I didn't speed up. He matched me for a half block and peeled away. At the safe room, the manager checked my token. He handed a key and didn't ask questions. I locked the door and set 2 alarms. 1 for the pilot sprint, 1 for the morning statement. I stretched on the floor until the tension bled out. Sleep came in uneven chunks with sharp edges. I woke before the alarm and watched the ceiling. Breath in, breath out, hands still. Today carried the weight of crossing lines cleanly. I stood and took that weight without argument. The morning sprint started with a server hiccup. I rerouted and kicked the service back to life. 2 testers messaged a bug that my fear. I patched the flow and tightened the form logic. The conversion resumed climbing while the log rolled. When the clock hit 9, a final message arrived. Blazer Woman sent a short update with attachments. Reversal completed, accounts audited, interim protections applied. She added one personal line that hit bone. Your restraint made this winnable. I closed my eyes and counted to 7. I texted Mara only the words she allowed. On plan. The dots never appeared. Discipline told me to let the silence stand. At noon, the partner's assistant emailed a countersigned pilot. Short, direct, brutal on deadlines. Perfect. I uploaded the deliverable and hit submit. The platform responded with a timestamp and a thumbs-up icon. I stepped outside and felt the city move past me. The day didn't cheer and the sky didn't care. Still, my spine stayed straight for once. I walked toward a diner I didn't know well. A figure waited inside with a hood halfway up. Mara raised her cup and nodded to the empty seat. I sat and set my hands on the table. She slid a small envelope across, no flair. Your copy of the confirmation, she said. Keep this where noise can't reach. I tucked it away next to the card from earlier. She watched my face like she was recalibrating. You look taller, she observed with a faint curve of mouth. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's earned weight. I laughed once and let it ride out. Tom is in processing for a while, she continued. The friend flipped before lunch when presented with the ledger. Cameras caught him at the storage gate last night. She took a breath and let it out slowly. I'm changing locks and closing accounts today. Anything left for me? I asked with intention steady. One last return, she answered and slid a business card. A hiring manager's name, a time for a call. You'll do the rest yourself, she added without drama. You don't need me to finish becoming yourself. I stared at the card and then at her. The room hummed low and distant as background. Thank you for pulling me out of spiral, I said. She tapped the table twice like a gavel. You climbed, I pointed at the stairs. A news alert flashed on the mounted screen above us. Corporate statement, internal review, interim leadership. No names mentioned yet, but the outline was obvious. Mara watched for 3 seconds and then looked away. Let them manage their cleanup. We stood at the same moment without planning. Outside, traffic surged and stalled in a rhythm. She straightened my collar and stepped back. Tuesday night you owed me silence, she said. Debt paid with interest. I nodded and kept my hands at my sides. She turned down the block with quick measured strides. I watched until she merged with the flow. Then I faced the crosswalk and waited for the signal. When it changed, I moved with the crowd and did not hesitate.